I have a treat today. I have a treat. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why am I sitting next to Father Christmas? It's a good question. He is only Father Christmas for one day a year, right? And the lead up to that. All the rest of the days of the year, he is actually just my father. So, he's not a hobo. Introducing, we're going to call him Sponlie Senior, right? So hopefully we'll get him on again. But what he's going to do is he's going to go through with us, and I'm going to ask him the questions, how we got here. Because all these techniques that are used by the multi-level marketing companies, this kind of residual income, this showing everything off, where does it even come from? Why did we even get here? So tell us, please, what are your credentials? Why are you the best person I could find to talk about this with everyone today?
Because I'm your father, but I've 68, I graduated with a degree in economics. I went into the newspaper industry for about 20 years. And during that time, I got a master's degree in business administration. And then for the last 20 years of my career, I was a senior lecturer at Harper Adams University. My interest is in business and marketing. And that's so what you lectured in? Yes, I did, yes. And so I'm very interested in that, and particularly the historical background to the development of business and marketing.
So this is essentially your life's work, the research and the kind of, teaching of this subject to people.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Right. So I want to let's start at the beginning, because in multi-level marketing, there's this big kind of emphasis on this residual income. The idea is, and I know you don't know a great deal about multi-level marketing other than obviously anything you've been told from me, but there's a big thing in multi-level marketing where the idea is that you're supposed to build this big team of people underneath you, and that's when you work really hard to do it. And once you've got this team of people underneath, you can kind of sit back and enjoy the residual income. So can you start by explaining how it all began back before we were agricultural and then bringing us kind of here?
Well, for most of the time, I mean, I don't want to go into, the development of human beings, how they evolved, but for most of the time that man's been on Earth, we were hunter-gatherers. You went out, it was not very frequent.
Caught them, ate them, protein. And the same thing.
Yeah, for protein, and the women folk would stay at home. The men would go out and get trap or get hold of a wild animal. We then progressed to nomadism. I mean, basically, you had a herd of animals, and it saved you having to go out and hunt them. They were there, and it depended where you were. I mean, obviously, reindeer in Lapland. Sheep and goats in the Middle East, and they came to Britain because it's
just followed them around. We literally just followed them all over the place.
Followed them around, and it was a more efficient way.
Still up until this point, there isn't the idea is for the rest of your life, you're just going to follow these animals around. So the hunter-gatherers, literally every day it was the same. They got up, they foraged, they hunted. The nomads, there was no kind of idea of preserving for the future because they just lived with them.
No. Yes, they lived with them, and it was quite tough because when you got to a certain age and you couldn't cross the river because you had to take animals across, you were just left behind, and you knew that was it. You just stayed there and died. It was a tough world. Then about, they say, 8 to 10,000 BC, in the Middle East and in China and India, we discovered that just by chance, cereal crops arrived. Rice in China and India, wheat and barley in the Middle East. And we then ground it, and people stayed in one place. You weren't moving then. And you have...
So we learned how to, we realised we could get seeds and stuff, bury it, grow it, and we didn't have to go anywhere. We didn't have to move. And
that's exactly right.
Then we could breed animals and stuff.
And it was agricultural. One of the things that I get very cross about it, people say it was farming. Farming comes much later. Farming is a business. There was no idea of a business. had a land. You didn't own things. It wasn't ownership. But what evolved, particularly if we talk about England and Europe, is a form of what is called three-field system of around a village. People lived in a village, and you had three fields. One would be wheat, one might be barley, and one is fallow. You had to leave a field fallow, otherwise your crops couldn't sustain it. It was very primitive, and you had 3 acres. Each strip, you had a strip, so a man would have 3 acres, and he walked between it. Not efficient.
Everybody had a bit of land that they were allowed to grow stuff on and look after animals. There was no business involved. There was no, I'm going to grow stuff and sell it. They just did it all for themselves. And that's how they fed their family. Yeah.
And the interesting, mentioning business, from about 800, Charlemagne introduced the silver.
Who? Say the name of that person.
Charlemagne. Charlemagne was the first person to do that. Charlemagne. And there was the silver penny. And we have it today. The penny is a pound. 240 silver pennies weighed a pound. But that was all we had. So if you go, my name is Stephen. King Stephen reigned 1135, right in the middle of the Middle Ages. That was the only coin you got, 1 silver penny. There was no business, finance. Most of it was done by exchange. You'd exchange and barter for things. And it was subsistence. That's very, very important to make. You didn't make a profit. You didn't have any surplus. If there was any surplus, went to the church. The church was all powerful, very important to, because people were frightened of death, that you could go to hell, and the church would fill you with, you don't want to do anything wrong.
And this was a Catholic society, wasn't it? And Catholicism mainly preached about, meek and mild,
Well, there was only one faith. There was a schism in 1054 between Greek Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church, but Catholic means everyone. Everybody was in the one church. Protestants broke away during the 1400s, 15th, 16th centuries.
Protestant means protest.
Protest, yeah.
Protestant means protest. When the Protestants came, it was a protest. It was against the sort of established kind of
against the church. But we're running on ahead. If you look at the village, it was a society based on status, not on merit. You were born a villain or a serf. You stayed like that.
Basically a peasant.
A peasant.
And this would have been the 90-odd%.
Yeah, that was it. And you accepted. There was no
you didn't move out of that.
Yeah. The lord of the manor had the role of fighting for you. It was specialized, because the big fear was the Mongols, the Vikings, nomad peoples who could come down and pinch your food.
So there was people still living as nomads, and the idea was that you'd have to protect yourself against them, because they would have just come down and stolen everything and then gone.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at even in the United Kingdom, the Scottish, up in the Highlands of Scotland, there's not a lot of land for food. So the Scots clans would come charging down onto the
They'll like that. They'll like that, won't they?
What?
This is the idea, isn't it? But back in the way back, because England is very flat land, isn't it? And that's why we kept on getting invaded, because our land, I know people don't like to think it, but the weather conditions in England, the sun and the rain and the sun and the rain and the sun and the rain,
you've got it.
Perfect. It's perfect for growing crops, absolutely perfect for growing crops. And the reason that we kept on getting invaded in England, as opposed to kind of Scotland and Wales, is because we had the flat land for growing stuff, whereas you've got Scotland and Wales, which is very hilly and mountainous, and it's not good for growing stuff. So the kind of Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings wanted to live in England. They weren't so concerned about the Scotland or Wales, or actually Cornwall.
Why do you think Hadrian built the wall? He just wanted to keep them out.
Yeah, because they would there was, if you can imagine, the sort of people living in England, which would have been sometimes invaders or whoever had settled in England, were growing stuff like nobody's business. And you've got people in Scotland that weren't able to grow things anywhere near as effectively, the same as Wales, and they would come down in their clans and steal stuff.
So the village, the lord of the manor, his job was to be trained up, ready to fight. So it was a much more efficient way of fighting. He was a professional. His job, was to get certain villagers weaken and create an army. And you got names like Mr. Archer, Mr. Fletcher. I mean, these were symbols of what they did. They were making archery. Fletcher was an arrow maker, and they would be fighting for you. On the land one, a good thing, Mrs. Sponlie, is look at Europe.
You can call me Victoria. They do know my first name.
Oh, all right, Victoria. Look at Europe. All the mountainous little states, Andorra, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, Luxembourg, San Marino, just go round. They're all on hills. Nobody wants them. They're hard to take. So they've survived. And you have today, dotted all around Europe, these mountainous regions. One exception, of course, is Holland. Nobody Holland was a hard one to fight because Holland was under the water. And so it had a specific role. And one of the things that I think is very interesting, the tallest people in the world are the Dutch. And I put it down to the fact that they had to keep their head above water.
That's by a process of natural selection.
Well, probably, yes. No, we might laugh, but why?
I don't. There is no evidence to. There is no
but
evidence.
It's an interesting. It's an interesting concept. But again,
purely purely his.
But it's interesting that countries like that, people don't want to invade. They're hard to keep if you do. And what's the value of them? You can't grow anything. They're not worth having. The idea is
that people want to invade places, and I mean this goes all the way up to modern days. If you look at Afghanistan, the reason, the sole reason that
look at Afghanistan.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Nobody wants Afghanistan.
It's the oil.
All they wanted, the whole time of India, the big fear, first with the East India Company, and then when it was taken over by Britain, was fighting my grandfather. Your great-grandfather has got a medal from the Northwest Frontier. The Northwest, or the Khyber Pass, was the big intro into India. And all we had to do was the whole time was keep defending that border because the Afghans would come in, and periodically we had to go into Afghanistan and fight them. But Afghanistan is a very hilly country and didn't grow anything. It was not, they had a
point
different
of that I'm
lifestyle.
saying that this was the days before the oil.
Absolutely.
Now,
oh yes, we're going back.
We know that the reason why countries get invaded historically is for the resources. Britain, England, not Britain, England was continuously invaded because of its farmland, its rich soil, and the fact that you could grow stuff, and that's why people wanted to come and live here. You get stronger countries will go to weaker countries because they want to take their stuff. That's the only reason. That's why we go into Afghanistan, because we want to take their stuff, and then we're going to try and defend it. Well, you level it up with the amount of soldiers that might die. And if you can, if you think you're going to get more than what we're going to need to pay out in pensions and all the rest of it in oil, they'll do it. And that's the reason why invasions
I'd go along.
Well, it is, isn't it? Well, it is, isn't it? If they think it's going to cost them more to invade, they're not going to do it. They're only going to invade somewhere if they're going to get more back.
Yeah, but it's not just about invading. I mean, a lot of the reason for the British Empire was not so much resources. Yes, there were resources, but it was a market for our goods. India would, when Gandhi came to England in 1930, what does he do? He goes to Lancashire and says to the cotton workers, stop sending your cotton. You've destroyed our industry because you're much more efficient. So obsessed was he that it's the only country in the world. What's in the center of the Indian flag? A spinning wheel. And it's a joke today. We're now getting cotton goods from India and from Bangladesh, and our own cotton industry is gone. It's gone completely. That's how it's reversed. But going back 100 years ago, we were sending goods all around the world, trading, which what you did. So it's not just taking resources. And remember, what was the spark in the American War of Revolutionary Wars? The Boston Tea Party, very famous, the Boston Tea Party. They went on and tipped the tea into because we were sending tea and selling it to the Americans and making money trading in that way. So it's not just taking resources, it's a market for our goods. But can I just return to the Middle Ages, just for it's a merit-based society. you can only rise.
Merit-based society.
No, sorry, it's a status-based.
It's a status-based
status-based. So
there's no merit. It doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. It doesn't matter how good you are at something.
Exactly.
You're born into the 90-odd%. You're there.
And you stay.
You're not moving. And this is important because this is so. And I made a video where I did liken it to feudalism. And you're in it. You're not getting out of this 90-odd% unless you are born into it, unless you get there. And I likened it to kind of, unless you are almost like the first person to conquer a land and stick your flag in it, then it's kind of, you know, but the reality is for the majority of everyone, you're going to stay in that 90% and you're going to work and work and work, and you're not going to, your lifestyle is not going to get any better.
But this went on, it was settled. Nobody accepted it. Only could rise to the church. No competition.
You can only rise to the church. You can't. The only way you're getting out of this 90% peasantry, a hard life, is if you got involved with the church, and then you could progress up, and you could live a better life.
The classic is the dear old Thomas à Becket, the famous Thomas à Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, was born as his family were serfs, villains, you know, at the bottom of the pile, and he rose.
Explain who this is. Explain who Thomas Becket is.
Thomas à Becket, Saint Thomas, murder in the cathedral, you know, the famous.
No, people won't know. People won't know who it is.
Well, there's Henry II said, "Who will rid me of this terrible priest?" Because he became very moral. He was a great friend of Henry II. And the knights went there and murdered him in the cathedral. It was a great shock. And he went scourged, you know, as king. He knelt there and beat himself to say, "I've been wrong. I should never have done that." But Thomas à Becket is a perfect example of the person who rose within the church. So church had a very important role. And of course, a tenth went to the church.
A tenth of what people earned,
and
I guess.
Where was the biggest barns? The tithe barn. You'll see Tithe Barn Road, Tyburn Road, and that's where the tithe barn. It was huge, and 10% of everything that was produced went to the church. And their monastic lands were enormous. They had monasteries that were set up, and the monks and had great land holdings. But so there's no competition. You couldn't make a profit from money. Usury laws. The only people who developed
what usury is. Explain what usury is.
Usury is making charging an interest rate. It's still banned in Islamic countries. So
it's called I think it's haram, which basically means illegal in Islam. Muslims will not they do not allow you to charge interest on things. And I was actually reading about this last night, and it's all to do with the fact that in Islam they believe that there should be a fair exchange of goods. If you sell something to somebody, they can pay you and you can make a profit on it, but it has to be a reasonable profit for the work you're putting in. You can't take this and then keep charging more and more, because you're taking money for something that you haven't even given them in the end. And that's the issue with it. So Muslim countries,
absolutely,
you cannot get, you know how we see credit cards now with interest rates. It's not allowed. It is not allowed in Islam.
Yeah, but that's the medieval part, if you like, because in another element of the medieval was the fair price that you've referred to. And so you get Gold Street, Wheat Street, and you all charge the same amount. There was no, go around the corner and you're charging more. No, competition was good. And things that we today accept were wicked. The grocer, to engross something was a wicked sin. You were but today, the greengrocer, the grocer, we accept it. Retailing comes from the French retailler, to cut again. A tailor comes, it's a cutter, somebody who cuts. Retailing, you would get dragged through the streets if you were caught doing that. You can't know that. The medieval world was absolutely settled on those rock hard principles.
The reason why this is so important, that we're going through this, and the reason why this is so important is because I likened the whole entire multi-level marketing model to feudalism, even down to moving out through the church, that we have these kind of, mentors. because we're talking about a society where there was no industry, there was no business, there was no innovation. You were like this, and this is how it was. And it contrasts so much to the selling point of this opportunity, which is purely based in retail, in business, in all of the things that are actually forbidden for a structure of this nature. And that's why it will show what we're going through. The context of this will show perfectly how a structure of this nature is completely incompatible with the success, with the with all of the things that it's sold off, with all of the things that is sold to the people to get them into this impossible structure, is completely incompatible with it. And that's the whole point of this Zoom, and that's what I want to show people. So carry on.
Well,
you said about retailing, you dragged through the streets.
So you've got
this structure, you're not allowed to charge interest. You're not allowed to, you know, make massive profits.
Well, you accept it wasn't
fair.
Yeah, but you accepted it. You thought that was a normal.
That was right. That's right. That's how it should be, isn't it?
You know, and you would be cross if somebody did do that. So the society was structured in that way and went on for century after century. But then we know that during the 1200s, so that's be the 13th century, was a good time, and we were running out of land. And one of the things I like going around seeing in England are these ridges in mountains called lynchets, where we were running out of land. People were cutting it
flat into a mountain so they could then grow stuff off it.
Grow stuff, because it was very inefficient agriculture. And then suddenly there was the famous bad winters of the early 1300s, and people were knocked back. And then it came 1349, the worst plague we talk about today, this terrible pandemic. But this terrible plague hit Europe, hit Britain. A third to a half of people are knocked out, dead.
Nearly half of the population is killed.
Absolutely.
Nearly half of the population gets killed.
Nearly half the population is wiped out. Deserted villages. Villages have got nobody there. And, you know, it was a shock, a big shock. And then you've got the peasants' revolt, because they weren't going to work for, you know, when you've got a shortage of labour.
Peasants' revolts. The peasants.
Peasants started to rebel. But most important, you've got a class of entrepreneurial farmers. The word farming comes in.
What years is this that the word farming comes
This
in?
would be developing in the 1300s. And if you look at the word farming, you don't hear of farmers in 1066. One of the things I always like saying is, how many farmers were there in 1066? And people say, oh, a few thousand. There were none. The word didn't exist. This is the important thing. Farming and agriculture. Agriculture is a subsistence. You didn't exchange. Everything was all in your own.
You grow your own stuff. You grow your own stuff.
You grow it, and you
grow your own stuff, and then you grow it, and then you look at for in the winter. You eat all the stuff that you've grown in the summer and spring.
It's a good point you're making.
Farming is making a business out of it. It's growing more than what you need in order for you to then go and sell it to other people and make money.
So what did we do? What we were good at? Sheep. For 500 years, 3/4 of the revenue of Britain came from woolen cloth. Enormously. I used to go on my knees and say, thank God for sheep. If we hadn't had sheep, Britain, we would not be speaking English around the world. We were good because of a wet climate, grass growing. We stopped exporting the raw wool, which used to go to the Low Countries, and started manufacturing here. And you'll hear of wool churches. Most of the money that they made went to building churches, because that's what you do with your surplus. But others started developing, and there was the embryo of it. The other thing that came in at that time were market towns. You get all over Britain. You didn't have a market town in 1200 or 8, 9, 10. But now you had a market town where these farms could then exchange. Oh, I'm special, and they would specialize, knowing they wouldn't go short. It was much more efficient to produce wool and swap it for food, and it was a much more efficient
And people began to
method.
specialize. People stopped bothering to grow all their own stuff. There was no point in me doing this. I'm not that good at growing this. What I'm really good at is I'm really good at looking after sheep. So I'm just going to have a massive flock of sheep. I'm going to look after them, and then I'm going to sell all the wool that I don't need. And then would they have had coins then, or would it have just been a basic?
Well, that's exactly you've hit in there.
Just been a trade. I'll give you wool and you give me food.
Yeah, the penny still there, but there was inflation, and the penny became a groat, fourpence, and you started getting shillings and all the modern, because trade, you've got the development of trade.
They needed a currency in order to.
It came back, so you've got the Black Death really was a trigger, and then Henry VIII abolished the monasteries. That was, as a result of his, divorce from, he couldn't get a divorce.
He parted from the Catholic Church,
set up,
obviously the monasteries were Catholic, so everything Catholic was.
So a lot of the monastic lands, and lots of, like the Russell family, it's funny to me even that Downton Abbey. Why is it Downton Abbey? Well, it's not a castle or a palace. It was people, these rich people, or they became rich, took over the monastic. So whether it's Downton Abbey or Woburn Abbey in Bedfordshire, lots of abbeys, Beaulieu Abbey, were taken over, and their lands were taken over and turned into massive
These were monasteries
farms.
at one point.
Yeah, and the abbeys taken over. And with the monastic lands, they were efficient farms. And there was a whole revolution, and new crops come along.
This is the beginning of industry. This is the beginning of entrepreneurs. The entrepreneur, absolutely. You've got the normal people who were just plodding along, like, well, we're just going to keep growing our own food and we're just going to keep doing things how we were. But then you get these kind of people, these entrepreneurs who, like I said, would be like, well, hold on a second. I bet I could I bet I could breed loads of sheep. Or you get one that I'm really good at growing wheat. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to grow loads more wheat than I could ever possibly use myself. Then I'm going to sell it to people. I'm going to get money, and I'm going to be able to buy more stuff then, better stuff, because everyone needs my wheat. And then these people can, and then they get to a point where they can, I could buy that old monastery. Well, that's nice, isn't it? We could move our family into there. And these are the beginning of, these are the first entrepreneurs. These are the first actual real entrepreneurs.
And you've mentioned, and I think it's important to mention about sheep, woolen cloth. What do you do with your preserved food? You basically, it was tough preserving food. You salt things down. All the animals,
because there wasn't anything that to put salt to keep meat and stuff, from going mold.
The only fresh, you had stew ponds where you'd had fish were kept, dovecots, and rabbits were not wild because they couldn't live in the winter. There's no food for them, so they were in warrens. And so on a farm, you'd have a warren, and Mr. Warner or Warrener name looked after the rabbits, and you could have the only fresh meat.
Do you think that's why we get Warner Brothers with the mascot of Bugs Bunny?
That's funny. I just think that's very funny. I don't know whether they realise that.
I bet nobody realises that, do they?
No, they probably don't. Somebody ought to go and point that out to them. But yes, that was the only fresh food you got. You haven't means of preserving. The only thing you could preserve was the wool off the back of a sheep, and you turn it into clothes. And look at the way fashion develops. So you can start
at that point. People there would have been in the upper class, the right upper class, but ordinary people.
But what do we think of as the first age of real clothing was the Elizabethan raid, when you start to see all these flamboyant clothes, new draperies they were called. People, it was a way of showing off their wealth. And that's a very big basic need in human beings, to show off conspicuous consumption.
More on that.
So they've this develops at that time. And the other thing about breaking away from the church, once people started to read the Bible, they started to interpret it the way they thought about it. And you have a term which it comes down, the Protestant work ethic. In Protestantism, it wasn't blessed to be poor or blessed to be meek.
So remember what we said about Catholic. There is a strong, the Catholic Church have lots of children, stay meek and mild, the meek will inherit the earth. It's very preached that you don't get above your station. And that's because at the time, it was very necessary to keep this 90% feeling like in the end, they were the ones to be on top. They were going to get into heaven. But then we move into this new era where we've got these entrepreneurs popping up left, right, and centre. And we have this new religion and fashions come in where they can then buy these new sort of houses. They can dress them. They can show off. Well, I'm not a peasant anymore. I've got these nice clothes I've got. And then we see Protestantism, the entire sort of preachings are then reinterpreted to promote entrepreneurialism. And we see it with the parable of the talents, where we have the parable of the talents, where the sons are all given coins. One son buries his coins in the ground, and this would have been this would have been back from the Catholic days, though. Let's save them and we'll keep them nice and safe for another day. And we got the other son who goes out and he makes his coins into more, and he makes
with three, weren't they? Yeah,
three coins, and the talent.
No, there were
currency.
Three people.
Three people. But the one, and that was it. And God was happy with the one who took his talents and he didn't waste his talents. Remember, it's where we get the word talent from. Talent was actually a currency, but it's where we get you don't waste your talent, you make more of your talents. So he took his and he made more of it. And this was considered, this is what you have to do now. This is how you be good. It's not about, you don't stay meek and mild anymore. You actually, and this, I mean, you could look at Britain and you look at us going on to the Industrial Revolution and beyond, and actually spearheading this kind of, I guess, revolution of, let's get out of the peasantry. Let's make something of our lives. We don't need to stay in this kind of, and this is as society's moving on. We're moving out of this kind of feudal structure now. And we're moving on now into a
you're skirting around the word individualism, which is a Protestant idea, whereas the Catholic was more the collective. We're all in this together.
Everyone. Catholic means everyone.
Whereas it's individualism. But you absolutely nailed it, if you like. The parable of the talents it underpins capitalism. If you want to say what fundamentally gives justification to capitalism, it is the parable of the talents. Because what does he do to the man who buries his talent?
Wastes his talent.
He says he's wasted. He's just
wasted your talent.
He says
he buries his three talents in the ground. He thinks he's doing the right thing.
He had one.
He buried. Well, so he
said, "I knew you were tough, and I didn't want to.
I didn't want to keeping it safe.
Yes, I kept it safe. So here it is.
And he gives
you
it
worthless
back
man, and he gives it. He gives it to the guy who's made the most. He says, "To him who has much, more will be given." Absolutely frightening when you think about it.
Gets the one coin that the other one buried in the ground, and he gives it to the one who made more, and he's like, there you go, you're going to get more. And this is kind of the man who buried it didn't do anything. The man who lived in the old ways of just staying where he is, don't try and make more, living in the old ways. And remember, back in these kind of old days, you weren't allowed to make profit off people. It had to be within reason. He then takes it and he gives the one that man had to the one who made three. Right, and that
makes most. But
it's so, and I think everyone can see that how this is connecting so much, because you've got the 90% who are still living in this old way, essentially within the feudal structure. The 90% of people who join multi-level marketing and make no money or lose money, their money is taken and given to kind of these ones up here that
I suppose you could look at it.
Company owners, isn't it? It's the company owners that started it all off in the end.
You're absolutely right about that, because the awful thing is, and it's the cruelest thing in the Bible, because we must mention this, it's a very important point.
And the reason the Bible is so important is because literally the Bible, Christianity and our life were one thing historically.
Yes,
we lived by it. Everything was dictated.
The only people who could read the Bible were the priests. Nobody.
Because it was all in Latin.
Wycliffe was John Wycliffe started trying to get the Bible printed into English, and printing comes on. We've gone through lots of things, but printing comes in with Gutenberg, and the Catholic Church was selling indulgences, and that's why, to build St. Peter's, and that's why Martin Luther rebelled and said, this is criminal, wicked. You're using printing to make more and more money, to build a church. This isn't what it's all about. And when the Bible was translated and people got hold of it, they then start interpreting, rightly or wrongly, and that parable of the talents is because the lad that only does nothing is cast. This is the word. Nothing in the Bible is crueler than this. He is cast into outer darkness where there's much wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now, that's where you end up. Wailing and gnashing of teeth. And that was it. And you got evolved from that.
This is why it's so
Calvin.
ingrained in us as a society, this idea, and this is what they sell to people to get them into this, because it's kind of so ingrained within us in society from this upbringing and this history where this was, you know, that you can't just be happy. You can't just be happy, you know, living an ordinary life. You must make more of yourself. You must. And this is what's kind of bashed into people to get them into this sort of bullshit structure where they can never, you know, move out of it.
Yeah, but I think one person that we should mention is John Calvin. Calvinism, and Max Weber wrote a famous book called Calvinism and the Rise of Capitalism, that it was seen there as a term, the Protestant work ethic. And Calvinism talked about predestination. The position you create in this world determined your position in the next world. And so you've got many.
So no more the meek will inherit the earth. Now,
it's
if you're just meek, you're not gonna, you know.
Yeah, but if you've built a business up and you've been very successful, you could then be seen as, you know, you're going to go on to an elevated position, and many of the. And you find amongst the Pilgrim Fathers and lots of non-conformists, Northern Ireland is a perfect example, a Presbyterian church over there. You know, even my, your great uncle, poor, they're not poor. Don't whack, laddie, don't whack. And that was poor people. There was even the idea that there were deserving poor and undeserving poor. You know, people that, you know, deserve, had worked hard and they fell on bad times. They were the deserving poor. But the people who didn't, that were work shy, they were the undeserving poor. We should have no sympathy for these individuals.
This is so capitalist, isn't it? This is so pure capitalist.
Well, it's the idea you get on. And whether we like capitalism or not, it has, for all its failings, has brought about the modern world and a very efficient world. And if you take a macro view, one of the most shocking things, I suppose, is the sudden growth in population with the Protestant religion comes, scientific religion, revolution, from 1450, 1490, the modern world evolves. Well, the population was less than 1 billion around the world. We know in 1800, about 1 billion people. Today, we're nudging up to 8 billion. I mean, what? It's taken man from what? When does man start? 300,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers, when, 20,000 Ice Age. Thousands of years it takes to get to 1 billion in 1800. And suddenly we're up to 8 billion. Life expectancy in 1800 was about 25. Now we're getting life expectancy of 80. So while people are very critical of capitalism and the changes that have been brought about and that we're cruel and there's this, that and the other, it has brought about enormous change. Now, whether you consider that good or bad, I don't know. It hasn't brought necessarily happiness, but people are better off. There's no question about that. And you could put that down to this revolution in the way we think about business. And because it's brought about great efficiencies. And I should mention one, there's very few laws in social, in the social sciences. I mean, lots we know that at ground zero, water boils at 100 degrees C. You can get through loads of laws in the scientific world, but laws about human beings are very rare. But one that is accepted is Engel's law. And this Prussian tax gatherer, I think he was, discovered that as people's income rose, the amount they spent on food declined. So if you go back to 1800, 75, 80% of money went on food. Today, 10%, even less if you look at figures for, and so we've got discretionary income to spend on things like furs, clothing, all the other things. That's what
moves us into kind of like, now we don't have to worry so much about food. There's kind of, I guess it's the Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, where we then move on to, well, we've got our food sorted, everything's, that's fine because we've moved on as a society. What else can we, what else do we need? What else do we want? And then obviously we go on to, do you want to continue?
Well, no, you've introduced Abraham Maslow, but it's very good. I mean, when you're going back to many, you're worried about, the first thing you worry about is food, water, they're the basic things. Then your needs of safety, security, clothing, then kinship and belonging. That's very important. Then where do you move on to?
Hold on. Go back to that. Kinship and belonging. The next one. So when you've got your sort of food and water, and you've got, your safety and you're able to feed yourself, the next thing we then need is belonging. We need to be part of a community. We need to be part of something. The reason that this is important is because this is what it's sold off. This is the first thing that when the multi-level marketing is sold off, that you're going to join this thing, and before you make any money, before anything, you're now part of a community. You have a community around, you have your network now. So it's the fulfillment, it's this kind of, it's sold off this fulfillment, and you've got your food, don't worry about your food, we're going to give you the rest now, and go on, continue.
Well, actually, that's you've driven onto a very interesting point about kinship and belonging. One of the shocks I got when I was at university, the first year we did sociology, and I remember Sid Holly going on about the incest taboo. And he said it was a social thing. And I said, no, it's biological. I was convinced. Ron Bourne, I grew up in Summertown in Oxford. Everybody said Ron Bourne is the result of,
who is this?
Incest. Ron Bourne. He was just a man that was there.
Just a random man. So there's a
random man.
A random man who lived where my dad.
He was nice. He was a docile old.
And everyone was saying that he was inbred, basically.
Yes, he was inbred, and that was the reason. And you grew up, as in all societies, in Britain, throughout the world, with this incest taboo. And the incest taboo basically says you mustn't inbreed.
You're not allowed to marry your own family
because of what happens, right? That is actually a perversion. I didn't realize, because I argued this with Sid Holloway. No, that's the incest taboo. And he said, no, all societies have an incest taboo to make people believe that. But the real reason is if you don't breed out, you're going to be vulnerable. Over the centuries, the small tribes that bred in, the larger tribes came over the hill and wiped them out. Yeah. So you had to do it. And if you look at the
so the idea is, let me just explain to people. People think, don't they, that you don't the idea is you don't marry, you don't have a child with your blood relatives because they're going to be disabled, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that was obviously a concern, but the more important concern before having a disabled child was if you didn't marry outside of your family, you were going to diminish your sizes. Whereas if you married outside your family, you then connected with other families. You then had a larger network of people. It's networking. It's networking essentially, isn't it? You network by marriage, by having children. You grow your network by obviously becoming family with them. Then if somebody invades and you have this large family network, they can't take your stuff, they can't take your they can't take anything that belongs to you because there's loads of you and you can fight them. Whereas if you inbreed, your children might be a bit, but you're just going to be a small amount. You're not going to have networked out and branched out.
That's right.
And you can be easy, we'll just take all your stuff, it's fine.
No, that was it. But that's why what is interesting is that taboo is brought away for very sensible reasons. You say, no, you can't because that
resonates more with particularly women.
But the real reason,
you're going to have a disabled child, you're going to have a deformed kid.
Yeah, so that would frighten you not to do it. But the real major reason was that. And of course, if you look at royal and dynastic, right, even down to Henry VIII, who broke, he married Catherine of Aragon. She was powerful. We had then friends with Spain, a powerful country.
Yeah. So people, particularly throughout royalty, the marriage would be political. They wouldn't get married because they fell in love. They get married to expand the network.
You've got it right.
All pure networking. It was
Absolutely.
all about networking.
The idea of romantic love is not
you would exactly you would get married to, in the case of Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon, and then we're friends with Spain now. We've got Spain. If anyone tries to invade us, well, Spain is going to fight with us now because one of their Spanish princess is now our queen. So it's all networking.
Absolutely.
It's all the basis of it all is networking.
Well, I from that point of view, yes, I would agree, and that's the kinship and belonging bit that you identify. But once you've got your incest taboo and you've got your kinship and belonging, he mentions these two other things: status and
so once you're now part of a network, you're in it. You've got your protection. It's very important. The reason it's very important is because when these people want to leave these companies, their biggest fear is that they're going to leave the network and they're going to get blocked out and turned on. And what not almost always, but what happens a lot of the time is they will then jump into another multi-level marketing company and rejoin another network to feel protected again. So you get your network of people. The next thing down is status. So you're within the network.
No, that's the hierarchy upward. Once you've got kinship, and most people in the world have got food safety, you take it all for granted.
Yeah.
But we spend much of our time based around status. Whatever it is, buying certain brands, buying certain things.
This is really important, and I'll come to this, and people who will understand why.
But status, and it's very important, status. The first person who studied it and came up with the term conspicuous consumption was a guy.
Hold on. Conspicuous consumption, right?
Yes.
Conspicuous consumption means showing off, like buying stuff and then showing everybody what you've got. So inconspicuous means keeping things private. Conspicuous means what, like I'm going to buy all this stuff. I'm going to have this new car. I'm going to have this beautiful house. I'm going to get my selfie and my camera, and I'm going to go around and show everyone, look at my amazing life. This is so you're part of the network, and the next thing is you need to show everyone how amazing it is. And the reason, obviously, he doesn't know a great deal about what they do within these companies, but what they typically do to encourage people to join, because they want to take their stuff from them, is conspicuously present everything that they've got. And they will lie about it a lot of the time. They will go round, they'll go to a kind of car dealership and they'll stand in front of look at my new car. Look, I bought this because I'm in this company now. You can have a lifestyle like mine. See, this is all completely, all these techniques that they use are completely ingrained into human society and human nature. Right, it's this conspicuous consumption, and anybody who has ever been in a multi-level marketing company, who has ever sort of criticized these companies, it will dawn on them what these people are doing. It's conspicuous consumption. Carry on.
But what Veblen did, he went and discovered that there was I'm trying to think of the name of the thing, but you can check this out. Anybody can. Potlatch. Potlatch, and these were nomadic Indian tribes, red Indian tribes in North America, and the tribal chief in a potlatch would get together some beautiful things that he'd got in front of all his tribe and smash them. Look how wealthy I am.
So these guys, these Native Americans, and these Native American tribes,
this is really going back in time.
So these Native American tribes. So so they've got everything now. They're at this point where they want to show everybody how wealthy. Oh, look, we've got everything. So what they did is they get these beautiful sort of ceramics and these pots. Show everyone, look at this, and then they smash it to show that they can.
But what Veblen was saying. It is a human need. Maslow is right. Human beings have a need, because a lot of people say, you'll meet people who will say, I don't need any. I go around in an old car, old clothes. I don't.
That's just one person. But as a whole, as humans as a whole, there is this need for for people to feel like there's a perception of them as having things, and we see this even now when you get these kind of people, these rich people that go to Marbella and they smash £100 bottles of champagne. It's all harks back to this need. They want people to perceive them as being, you know, they've got stuff, they've got a good lifestyle, haven't they? And this it all ties in to the techniques that are used to persuade people. So these techniques that are used to get people into these companies, they go all the way back to the core of our human nature. Human nature.
That we do. And if it isn't things, there's conspicuous leisure. You know, I'm not working, I'm going back.
Because I only have to work 3 hours a day and I can do it in my garden. I'm going to this amazing retreat in a mansion at the weekend with all these amazing people. You know, it's this kind of thing of like showing what you're able to do. You've built this lifestyle, and now I can live this amazing lifestyle, and you can too.
And the other one.
See how it all ties in.
Yeah, the other one that you've got the person who says, I don't believe in all this status things, but he'll show off his knowledge. Oh, didn't you know that? And recite a poem, let's say, and he said, gosh, aren't you clever? So I call that conspicuous competence. Oh, what's your golf handicap?
Yeah, do we know anyone? Do we know anyone who liked to show off by they didn't need to show this or this, but they liked it? Somebody you don't know about this person. To talk about how many millions of degrees they had, and this is all the same thing. It's the same.
It's the same concept.
It's the same concept. It's the same thing. This need for people to be a bit jealous of them. People almost want other people to be a bit jealous of them. You know.
Well, it's and I think you've got it absolutely right. That need for status, and I think it was interesting.
Status, the need for people to feel like people are looking up to you and wishing that they could have what you have, or be like you are, or do what you're doing.
And the big, I think, shock that came to the Labour Party, who believed in the working. I mean, let's get another one that people talk about, the working class. That the working class were people when they left the land, they had no land. And so they were called working class because they worked. That was all.
That was it. That was literally working class.
They didn't have land,
money or anything. All they were people who didn't own anything, who and whose reason they just worked. They would work in various places, and then they would be working class. And this was 90-odd%.
Yeah, and people and the party that tended to represent them was the Labour Party. And in recent times, it's had a lot of shock because a lot of people who would have been talked of as working class have got this status within them. They've got this need for individualism. And Margaret Thatcher sold off council houses. And what was the first thing most of these council house ex-tenants did? Paint the door a different colour. They did not want a yellow door, but the council came in and painted every door was yellow. They wanted a blue one. They wanted this individualism. They wanted to be.
So even though they had, these were not rich people, they had just bought their council houses. Their way of expressing their need for status was to speak, right, I don't want the old council door anymore. I want a new door, or I want to paint my door. So everybody knows that I own my house now. I'm not, I own my house now. But what it all points back to is this core within people, right, to raise yourself out of the life that you're living and be able to show people. And this is so important, because this is exactly what is used to manipulate the largely kind of low income ladies mainly to become part of these companies, because it's this idea. And what they're told is, you don't have to, particularly some of them will be, a lot of the time it's single mothers, they will be on benefits because their children aren't even able to go, or there will be new mothers who can't work, and they're told, well, you don't want to, do you want to live like that forever? I used to be like you once. I used to live like you once. I couldn't even take my children on a day out because we just didn't have the money. And then And then I joined this wonderful company, you know, I joined FM World, or I joined the body shop at home. And now look at me, look at my house, look at my car. And I'm taking my kids out all the time, and they will show, you know, their kids, look, I could never have bought this before. And it's this, and, you know, all my goods that I can now afford. And it's this kind of hits the kind of core within people, the need within people, once they've got the kind of things that you need before that, the food and the community, to now you have to really work at it, because you can live like me, you can be like me, and they never can, because actually they are still, they have actually been dragged into this feudalistic structure where they're in the 90% and they can never ever get out of there. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no,
it's a complete scam. You're dragging people into a pyramid structure like the Middle Ages, where they can never move out of there, but sold off the back of this new concept of you can raise out of this kind of lowly beginnings in life. You can get yourself out of this kind of situation you're in where you've got nothing, and you can be like me. And it's a complete and utter con. And the reason I wanted to show this was so people could just see how impossible this is, why it works so effectively, and how it's a complete scam and a con, and how it will never work apart from for the 1%. It's you might as well go and gamble. Carry on.
No.
You want to talk about the evolution of the middle class? Because
yes, you've that really is, and the word, the French word bourgeoisie. You know, the big thing that Karl Marx went about, the bourgeois. You know, and they were people, bourges, that lived in the city. So your rural rustics, your peasants, men living on the land. French, it's a French word, pays. If you keep to two simple things, peasant, worked on the land, lived in a village. This new market towns were developing. People
so the people who had made loads of wool, the people who
were going to live in the town, bourgeois.
I'm now going to take, I won't want to live in the country anymore with all the,
I've got a loom, and I'm going to leave my loom
where it's all nice, and I can sell my wool, and I can buy more things that I might like, and I can adorn myself.
And I might have a loom where I weave, and I'm going to leave it to you.
Yeah. I'll have my looms, I'll weave, and you can do that. You can do that, and I'll pay you to do that, and I'm going to come and live in this nice lifestyle in the city. I don't want to be here.
But I'm mentioning the loom because if you handed it down, it became an heirloom.
Oh, right.
An heirloom.
So this was a business. The loom was a business.
Oh yeah.
So there you go. That was a way of, obviously, so that's where we get the heirloom from. That's where we get you know, heirlooms, inheritance from the loom being passed down.
But these people lived in the town, and they were middle class, and the importance of middle class, and it's developing in India and in China massively.
So we see countries now who still, until fairly recently, still kind of lived this life where the 90% were living in slums, and you get this tiny percentage of society, and the same in China, this tiny percentage of society, who are controlling everything. And now, obviously, with them, industry and entrepreneurials and all the rest of it are now themselves evolving their own middle class in India. And there isn't this massive, you know,
and it is,
and this is all we did. This is all that happened. You look at India and China sort of today. This is Britain. When would we be able
going
to
back to going back to 1700s?
Yeah, so the 1700s.
We were developing, and we developed so many things in this country. But one entrepreneur I like was Josiah Wedgwood, who funny enough was grandfather to Charles Darwin. That's where Darwin had the money from, the Wedgwood. And Wedgwood created so many new ideas, but the one I liked most of all was shopping. Shopping is
So can we just explain who is Josiah Wedgwood?
There's Josiah, it's Wedgwood pottery.
Josiah Wedgwood started the pottery, Wedgwood pottery, right?
Yeah.
So shitloads of money. He has a grandson.
He developed. What he did, he got hold of beautiful antique vases, and made them affordable for a new class of people, the middle class. So you could own.
Oh, okay, there you go then. Made them affordable.
And he would make a tea service. He would make a tea service or a dinner service. And whereas people going back to those days,
a really innovative guy, really clever.
So you went to a shop and you would say, "Can I have this? Can I have this?" You know, that's what it was, a depot. He came up with
like Argos.
Yeah. Yeah, you just bought.
That was how most people shop. Kind of like Argos, you turn up with your list of stuff and the shopkeeper would go and get it. And you had to just wait.
Yes. He came up with, he just had a shop front and would put a table, beautiful table with all the stuff. So people looked in and said, I want that.
He started this thing where rather than just have it there and people had to ask, he put it all out, spread it all out in front of them so they could see it
so they could desire it. And from that you evolve, the whole idea of shopping department stores evolved.
That's what started the whole idea of walking into a shop and looking and getting your own things. That's how that started.
And of course that developed a middle class who wanted, one of the things they liked was bone china, because when you used to show off your bone china, you pour hot tea into it. Well, if it was not bone china, it would break and you could
the reason for this, sorry, let me just explain. So bone china is made with bone. Crushed up bone is then put in the bone china. And the reason why that's important is because when you pour hot water in something with actual bone in it, because of the nature of bone, it expands so it doesn't break. So you can pour hot water in bone china and it won't break. If it hasn't got the bone in it and it's not really bone china, you'll pour the hot water in it and it'll smash.
Yeah, and of course that's a perfect example of status, isn't it? To show off, oh look, they've got the very latest.
My tea straight in.
But that's the engine of development, because it's all right having people working in factories making things, but who are they going to sell it to? Exactly. You've got to have people with the wherewithal. So you've got to create a class of people who've got enough what we call discretionary income, other income for food and the basic, who can afford to buy this. And this is what Engels pointed out.
The innovators, the people like Wedgwood, needed a class of people who had enough that they were going to mass produce stuff, and they needed a class of people who were going to be able to buy it. And they couldn't, the working classes couldn't buy this. They didn't have any money. They only had enough money to feed themselves. They only had enough money to fulfill their first set of basic needs. They only had enough money to get food and be part of a community. The next human need needed to be fulfilled by the new evolved class, which was the middle class, which was started by these kind of more entrepreneurial people who then by the way went on to sort of have their own children educated into be able to, and then it expands. But we then see after this new class of people, and it evolves, and this is why it's so important. It evolves out of the people who were only able to. So let's just take away working class and middle class because it has too many modern contexts. Let's just look at it as this. You got the first 90% of people who could only fulfill their first couple of basic human needs. They could feed themselves, they could sort of house themselves, and they were part of something. They had no money to fulfill anymore, right? Yeah. You then get the next stage, and these are the people who can fulfill all their human needs up to now we can show ourselves off, now we can feel good about ourselves, look at us. And they were the ones that would then go and buy all the stuff that the kind of new entrepreneurs, the kind of new business people, the people that were then producing things en masse for people to fulfill that need. So an entire industry starts for people to, because this is going to go on to the next thing where we're talking about skincare and and all the rest of it. We now have this class of people who are able to fulfill this need, and they're able to show off and show people. And this is the whole idea. You want to get to here. You want to be here. So all the people down here, they ideally want to get up to here. And this is so important with multi-level marketing, because you've got the 90% who are in this situation where, okay, we're not living in the back in the days, but they fundamentally wants to get to a point where they can genuinely say, I've got stuff, I've got loads of nice things. It's completely tied into that. It's purely money. I can buy new cars, I can go on holiday whenever I want, I can send my children to these nice schools, I can do all these things that I couldn't do before. And if you want to be like me, you have to get involved with what I'm doing. It's so horrific what's going on to people. I can't describe you. And I wanted to do this video because I wanted the people that this is happening to understand how these techniques came about, why these techniques are used, and how ingrained into society and the human nature it is to want these things, and how they're not, it's normal to want these things, but how impossible once you're then brought into this structure where you're stuck in a position where you can never get out of it, how impossible it is, and how much of a con this whole entire thing is. Because I don't think that a video has been made yet to explain to people why these techniques work.
No, you're absolutely right to highlight it. You know, the was it Barnum and Bailey? There's a sucker born every minute. You know, there's you know, you just think people don't fall for the 3-card trick, but they do.
But this is it, because they do, and then they feel ashamed of themselves that they do.
Yeah.
And then they're blamed. They're told, well, the only reason that you failed is because you weren't working hard enough. You quit, so you failed because you quit. You weren't working hard enough, and now you're speaking out against the industry because you're a failure. And that's why it's, you know, I make a point to say I've never been in this industry. I've never been in multi-level marketing. I'm literally speaking out because I find the whole entire thing grotesque. And I want it banned in the United Kingdom because it's disgusting and it's grotesque. But yeah, should we move on then to kind of go through? I mean, we then see obviously the cosmetics industry begins to kind of rise up, and this is all down to. Do you want to start with this? So where does it begin? Why do people suddenly start being concerned about, you know?
Well, you're absolutely outdated. Well, the first soap we had was made from ashes and animal fat. In fact, if you go camping and you get some ash and you had to fry up or something, and you put ashes in with the oil that's in the pan, you'll notice it washes. They then found a hard soap where with a process of saponification, you got better soap. And during the 19th century, there was a famous statement: cleanliness is next to godliness. Wow, you've got to be clean. And it was good. It was good in many ways, because whether we like it or not, we get a lot of criticism of the 19th century in this country. Say, oh, terrible slums and it's awful. But we have some useful figures, because 1801 was the first census and there weren't 10 million people. It took us thousands of years to get to 10 million. By 1900, 40 million. And we'd exported more people around the world than any other country. Just look at all the towns in America. Here in Australia, there's a town. Millions of people left Britain and emigrated at the same time. And yet we still went from 10 to 40 million. And yet teachers will tell you, but young kids, oh, the slums and the terrible things. Yes, there were slums, but infant mortality rates went right down. And cleanliness, people were overcoming a lot of disease, and people did wash far more. And the first company that famed in this country, and it's still big around the world, was Mr. Lever and his company, where he branded a product and called it Sunlight and made it a bar of soap. You didn't buy it as a commodity. I don't know where it comes. I just buy it by weight, as you might go into a greengrocer and buy so many aubergines or so many carrots. There's no branded, it's just a commodity, carrots. You bought soap in that way. He branded it and people said, oh, lovely smell. And
so he's made a soap and he's like, this is my special soap. And I put this. And what was that? Well,
it was a very good soap. You wash with it, you could wash your clothes with it, because soap powder hadn't come around. No. That comes later. But I would like to draw attention to one. He wasn't necessarily innovative on two things that he did in coming up with it, but he exploited the idea when he saw it. And he saw in America a famous slogan: why does a woman look old sooner than a man? Gosh, wow. And he hammered that around the world. Why does a woman look old?
This all feeds into female insecurity, and this is kind of
it would be nice for you to put that ad up on your whatever it is.
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, and there it is. He said, because men don't have to slave. Poor women have to slave. But if only they knew about Sunlight soap, they wouldn't look so old. And boy, they bought it. They loved that. And of course, he develops other brands. He takes on Persil and soap powders. invented with Procter and Gamble. They're the two biggest soap manufacturers in the world, and perfume companies and skincare companies. It's either Procter and Gamble, an American company, or Unilever, as it became a British company. Look at all the massive products each of those companies produce, developing Lux. 9 out of 10 Hollywood actresses use Lux.
And you see, we bring into celebrity endorsements now.
Oh yes, celebrity endorsements.
And this is the beginnings of it, and this is moving towards where we are today.
And the other one there was a product called Odo Rono, only a small company in America, but Lifebuoy was another one. It was a big brand in America. You washed yourself, Lifebuoy, and they developed this. If you use Lifebuoy, be careful, because BO. What's that? I didn't know I got BO. What is it? Body odor. But you can be cured with this, and loads of ads, and they particularly appeal to women. So I can understand multi-level marketing, a term the ad industry calls two tarts in a kitchen. It's a bit blunt, but the conviction of the innocent and the ignorant by the knowledgeable. Look how many ads you see on television with you, and you believe. It's bizarre if you say to people, did anybody ever say that to you? Well, no, but you'll believe it when you see it. Hello, Mrs. Sponlie, how do you do that lovely whatever you've got? How did you? Oh, I use so and so. Gosh, and then you show a picture of, oh, come in and have a look. I've used it now, and look what I've got. And it's that conviction of the innocent and the ignorant by the knowledgeable. Somebody
this
comes
is
along.
It. They do this with the selling of the opportunity.
Yes.
People,
and
I've got look at what I've got now.
And it's bizarre. But if you look at it, the ads and the whole thing, and it's just nonsensical.
This is how this is
people
what's
believe
on sale.
it. But people believe it, because if you look at advertising over right up to date, that concept comes through in about half the ads you watch on. You think, well, nobody's ever said to me, oh, haven't you done this, or have you done this? It's sort of, oh, look, do you use this? And it's ridiculous. But it works, and people go on doing it. And if we refer back to why does a woman look old sooner than a man? Well, in 1890, that went down a storm because women did think that. Today, you'd say, well, it's my old man that looks older than me. I mean, it just wouldn't work today because times have changed, things have changed. You've got to express your soap, or it's not even soap today. Soap's out. What's soap? You're going to have a generation growing not even know what a bar of soap is, because it's now shower gel or whatever. New
all the products, the array, the multiple array of products, and this is where it all stems from. This kind of thing. Why does a woman look older than a man? The first kind of beginnings of the adverts to feed into women's insecurity about their looks, to turning into this entire hundreds and hundreds, thousands of products purely to put on your face to reduce wrinkles, reduce lines, improve skin, skin under the eyes, skin around the, everything. And there is thousands. And these multi-level marketing companies, one of the biggest thing is skincare. It's skincare. It's, because it's the easiest thing to kind of be like, well, look at me. And they always overcharge on it. And it's, we've got, you see with Globe, which is a business bombshells, a company I made videos about, they rush to make this, they call it a beauty bundle, which is this box of crap. And it's so low quality, but it's this idea that the victims are going to sit and do their kind of tutorials live and show the regime. And oh, my skin has never glowed like this before. Oh, this is so wonderful. And this is what they do. But the problem is these people aren't celebrities. So whereas you look and we go back to the beginnings, like you said, the Hollywood actresses, this is what sells stuff. It's the celebrity endorsement. Well, I use it. And then we bring it to that kind of the multi-level marketing companies, and the victims attempting to sell this stuff. Nobody ever wants to buy it off them. Why do I want to buy a box of pink things? Who are you? Who are you? Why would I believe you? You're just a random person on my Facebook. And this is why it's complete nonsense. What they then go on to sell is my life here.
Yeah.
But the point of the whole skincare thing and the feeding in the insecurity, it doesn't just stop with the skincare, it's down to the weight loss. Weight loss is a massive one now in the, and they do the pictures of the woman before when she's fat, and now she's much thinner because she used, these pills that put fat in or she used these body wraps or this NutriCode or you know what I mean? And it's the feeding off, the constant feeding off, first and foremost, women's insecurities. And then secondly, you don't want to live in that life anymore. You can't even take your kids on a day out. I take my kids on days out all the time. You can be like me. I've got a lovely car as well. The company pays for it. And then we arrive here with this kind of perfect storm of every single thing that will affect a woman on an emotional level presented at their feet as the solution to all their problems. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is why it's so effective.
Around a million ways of demonstrating it, but that's it, quite simply. And to go and buy all these very expensive, and of course we have a term for this, value added. There's even a tax, value added tax, that your basic commodity suddenly that is wheat is £200 a ton. It's a lot of weight. You look how much that is in when you look at all the cereals, look at all the food. That £200 a ton then becomes £10,000 in all the derivatives that come out of it. And at each stage we're adding something. Oh, we've taken that out, and this is a low calorie, what's it made from that same.
It's offering people a quick fix all the time. It's the whole entire of this industry is this idea of solving everyone's problems. That they can't ever solve because it is just a nonsense, and that's how they sell it off. They sell it off and bring it all down to this fulfillment, and ultimately we move up the Maslow's hierarchy of human needs to peace of mind and self-esteem. And the problem is the people who do manage to make it to the top, it's a pyramid as well, and people who do manage to get to this point where they have gone beyond this, they can't have peace of mind in the end because they understand how they're earning their money. They understand how they're earning their money is from thousands of people losing money and thousands of people living in despair. And a lot of people can't reconcile that with themselves. The people who can reconcile that with themselves are people who, they can never be self-actualized anyway because they know where their money comes from. So in the end, it's kind of, if you're fulfilling your hierarchy of human needs through a multi-level marketing company, you can never fully fulfill them because you can never reach the top and reach self-actualization. It's impossible. If you know that you make your money from scamming people.
Yeah,
you will never have peace of mind.
And I think if you investigate a person, I was reading about, I won't mention by name, the famous coughing in what's the name, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yeah.
The guy that got caught out because they were coughing, and it went to court. I was reading about him recently, and this guy his wife had been on, and she'd won 32,000. He contested that he didn't, this coughing.
Tried to get you on, they never called us back. I tried to get him on a few times. I called, but they never called us back.
But
they knew he'd win.
I thought the interesting thing was
he used to do it. We used to sit there, and he'd get every single answer. Every single answer. The only ones he didn't get are like pop stars and things like that.
But
then I feel like he'd have done he would have been able to use his like 50-50s and
they would pick me out as me. But I thought the interesting thing about this guy, when it came out that he had actually made half a dozen claims on insurance, and he got found out by Direct Line because he had a claim for £20,000 and he hadn't declared that he'd got one before. Now, one of the things that might be interesting is to look at the background of some of the people in the senior positions within any company, whether it's MLM.
They've all got the lawsuits and all sorts behind them.
What sort of upbringing did they come from? Nice home, decent people, or have they had, what are their values, basically?
I don't think it matters what home they came from.
No, but I meant that if they were brought up to be wicked or in,
well, you don't know. You don't know how people's home life was, do you? That's the whole thing.
No, but if they,
I cannot imagine, and this is why, I don't ever get cross with these people who, because I do think to myself, some of these people who get to the top, and they have dehumanized everyone beneath them. They've dehumanized everyone beneath them. I do wonder what sort of a home life they must have had. It can't have been particularly
and if they were brought up to have this, in ways you feel if somebody had been brought up to have a value system, they wouldn't get involved in that sort of thing.
No, but this is the thing. I don't think they have been brought up to have a value system, or and this is the concern is, that they've got, they bring their kids into it. So they use their kids to kind of sell stuff, and they bring their kids into it, and in the end, what does mummy do for a living when they're in the 1%? Well, I do this. It doesn't take long to dawn on somebody, anyone with half a brain cell, but these people are losing money beneath you. These people know that the people beneath them are losing money, and it takes a certain type of person who can continue to do this. And I think they're evil. I think that they're evil. I think that they may not have been born evil, but they've just become that way. That they lost their humanity. They have they dehumanize people, because you cannot earn your money by taking money from the most vulnerable in society and be able to sleep at night, unless you completely dehumanize them. And they do. And you see them, they call it, we're building a business, building underneath you. Well, what they're really talking about is people being put underneath people. This is the building. So these human beings become building blocks. They're not human beings anymore. They're bricks, they're building blocks, they're business building, and they completely dehumanize every last one of them. And that's how they can be here. What their values are, you'd have to go into their home lives. I can't imagine to be able to do that to people on whole. And this is the thing, this is why I pity some of them sometimes. Well, we know that certain ones have had very dysfunctional upbringings, and in the case of there's a company called TS Life, and the owner of this company was brought up in care his whole life, and you just think to yourself, I pity him for that. And I just think to him, he's grown up with probably not a great deal of role models, ahead of, above him. He's probably not been treated well growing up, was he? Let's face it, we're talking about, the sort of 1980s care homes. To this point where I don't think that people have had a bad upbringing are going to necessarily go on to do this, but you can kind of understand how somebody with no role models, no teaching of morality, only seeing the worst from the people in the positions of authority around them, could arrive at a point where they are able to dehumanize people, because they themselves were dehumanized growing up. They themselves, but they themselves were treated as a thing to be, so that's why I do have pity for these people like that. But there are other ones that I don't see any explanation for their behaviors other than to just say, well, you're just evil. You were just born evil.
I'm going to suggest something to you. If you look at entrepreneurs in the last 200 years, many of them became great philanthropists. Cadbury's, Lever himself has still got a trust. Nuffield, Carnegie. Carnegie famously said, a man who dies rich dies disgraced. And he gave his money away. And it would be interesting, and here is maybe get somebody to do it as a dissertation at university, to analyze MLM owners, or how many of them are philanthropists. Do they support charities?
This is it. No, but this is the thing. They start these charities in order to be like, it's just another way to.
No, I mean proper charity.
They don't ever start charities from themselves, and they then go and give their own money. No, they never do anything like that.
No, that's what I'm on about. But that is.
But you don't need. That it would be. It's completely in the face of everything they're doing, because they're already taking money from the people who are most in need of charity in the
all right, but then if you take a cross section of recognized businesses, business owners, many of them are involved, have particular charities that they donate money to, or have set up foundation trusts. It would be interesting to compare and contrast your MLM companies with recognized business to say
they would only start charities in order to legitimize themselves and
no, isn't necessarily starting a charity.
Not starting you, but to donate to already established charities. None donate. Well, we had the business bombshells, now known as Globe, who were changing from plastic packaging to frosted glass packaging, who thought it was appropriate to dump all their old plastic packaged beauty bundles at Refuge, which is a women's shelter. These are beauty. And now remember, this is a company who have people leaving. They started credit. You could buy these beauty bundles on credit, 5 products for £125. There are people leaving that company now, pregnant mothers who have got £200 coming out of their account every month from debts that they bought, stock holding these beauty bundles to climb the pyramid. Yeah.
Terrible.
And then they have the nerve to be, oh, look how wonderful we are. We're going to donate to Refuge. They told everyone that they were partnering with them. People got in touch with Refuge. Refuge were absolutely outraged that they'd even mentioned them. Absolutely outraged, wants absolutely nothing to do with them because they understand. I mean, you've got to remember, a lot of the women that will have been going through the Refuge doors will have been involved in companies like this, and this would have made matters in their already, volatile relationships even worse, So no, they do nothing for established charities. They donate no money to established charities. They only want money for themselves.
That's what we were hinting at. What sort of people are they that run these companies?
Selfish, very selfish, evil people. The ones that.
Well, you've got to be careful to say that.
They're evil. They are definitely evil. Whether they were born that way or they became that way, they are poisoned by. They make obscene amounts of money. Their products are not subject to any market forces. It's purely based on the victims getting involved and selling them. The victims are always the most vulnerable in society, disabled people, and they have their DLA, they have the benefits, they have it. They have British taxpayers' money, put it that way, funds this. Kids go without. Oh, well, we're just, well, there won't be a lot of presents this year for Christmas because Mummy's building her business. But next year, when I've built my business, we're going to have the best Christmas ever. And these women really believe this. These women are absolutely desperate. They're absolutely desperate to get out of this situation that they're in, to get out of this life where they have nothing. They are desperate. And they've been told, well, we made these sacrifices. We made these sacrifices early on and they paid off for us. So if you don't make these sacrifices now, how do you ever expect to build your business? How do you ever expect to come off benefits? And this is what is preached to them.
It's a bit like, it just reminds me of the thought of something like drug addiction, where you've got people addicted and they can't get out of it. They're stuck.
It's exactly that. And then when they realise that it's not working out for them in one company, they move to another company because everyone knows FM World's rubbish. Everyone knows there's too many people joining FM World now. You should join this brand new MLM well, it's not brand new, but we're just relaunching in the UK, Kiani. And you can get in and you can be one of the first. You can be one of the first, and it's going to be easier for you to build people then. And it never is, because even if you get in quite early, if you're not charismatic, if you're not able to, if you're not confident, you're still not going to be able to recruit people. You've got to be a sort of you've got to be able to talk to people. You've got to be confident. You've got to be able to go live. And this whole bullshit that it's sold off, that ordinary people, ordinary introverted, shy, disabled people can make this work, is just a complete con. And they have their money off them and they leave them with nothing. And they leave them with, essentially, again, the British taxpayer picks up the tab. I couldn't pay my housing benefit because I needed I didn't pay my landlord because I needed that money to invest in my business. They're then kicked out of their sort of, you know, they were on housing benefit, and then they're put in a hostel, and then it's like, well, I've got 3 kids, you know. The wider implications of this just go so far throughout society, but the big thing is that they're affecting the most vulnerable, and they're a massive strain in the end on the taxpayer. And I don't think people quite realise this side of it.
But I think you should be highlighting this to social services, to MPs. Very, very good way.
We are trying, trust me. But it's such a web. It's such a large, intricate web, and there's so much lack of understanding. And that's why we're trying to raise the education that these MPs, they have no understanding of this. I had no understanding of this before sort of July last year. You see it as this thing that, okay, it might be a bit embarrassing that they're doing this, but, you know, they're just selling stuff. It's just a sales job. What harm are they doing? They might probably, you know, we have Avon. Now, Avon in 2005 adopted the multi-level marketing business model. The reason that they did that is because, if you can imagine, sort of pre-2005, and it was getting to the point of, you know, they were forced to. Sort of in the 90s, Avon did quite well because you didn't have the internet, there was women at home alone, okay, all day long. You get this woman turn up at the door, oh, look, oh, yeah, come on in, you know, and they would be able to make a living. They'd be able to, maybe not make
it wasn't the Tupperware party.
The same with the Tupperware parties. They kind of worked because there wasn't the internet there, and they worked, and realistically, the only women who were ever going to do something like that were not going to be your most vulnerable in society. They were going to be the kind of more confident, more out there women who were happy to knock on people's doors, who had the confidence to go chat and talk to everybody. So these companies couldn't target the most vulnerable. We see the internet and people at home, and, you know, and they get this kind of new ability to target people and sell it to people who it's completely will never have been appropriate for them back then. It will never be appropriate for them now. We have Avon have this kind of good track history, if you like, of not, you know, being particularly harmful till 2005. And they still use that sort of decent track history. And and we have people in the job centre advising people to join Avon. Avon has a 99% failure rate, the same as any others. 99% of the people who join Avon will either lose money or earn no money. And we have the job centre promoting Avon. This is the lack of education and understanding behind these things. I mean, I'm telling you stuff that you didn't realise, right? And this is what's going on here. You've got establishments like the most legit establishment for finding employment, our job centre, promoting Avon, promoting a multi-level marketing company. And it's sick. It's absolutely sick, because people will go in for these kind of, if you like, job. Everyone gets a job because they'll be worried that they're going to get sanctioned. Well, I better look into that Avon thing that I was advised about, because if I don't look into that Avon thing, I might get sanctioned. I'm not. Because now they have to prove, once the child gets to 3 and you're qualified for 30 hours, they have to prove that they're looking for work. They have to show what they've been doing week in, week out. They can't just sit around. It's people, people still have this perception of like these lazy mothers that are just popping kids out. You don't get benefits past you don't get assistance for your children, let's say, past 2 children now. Once that last child reaches 3, the expectation is that unless you're looking for work and you've got to prove it, we need you to fill this journal in every day and show what you're doing. You know, all these hours that you could be we need to show us. You need to prove it to us. If you're offered a job interview, you need to go for it. And if you can't go for that job interview, or you can't turn up for your job centre interview, you're sanctioned. We're going to take some of your money away. It's honestly, it's not. You can't, these people, unless they've got drug, alcohol addictions, and even disabilities now, you know, even a disability isn't even enough anymore. You have to have a bad disability to get off it. But, you know, if you're just kind of, if you like, the sturdy beggar, you're not allowed. You are not, they will not leave these women are not left alone until they are, you know, able to prove that they've either got a job or they're looking. And that's why they fall into the hands of these predatory multi-level marketing companies, because they see it as a solution. I can work at home. I've got my children. I don't have to leave my children. I can be at home at 3 o'clock. I can work it around the kids, and all. I'm a bit. I'm really. I don't want to be around people. It's all right. You work from home. Just do makeup. You sell it, and they're sold it off the back of this. And this is why, particularly now, particularly in lockdown, when there was so few jobs, particularly mothers of young children are falling into the hands of these schemes.
So sad.
It really is. And these aren't women that they're really trying, and it's worse than slavery in many ways, because you've got slavery with the kind of added, we need your money as well. So we're taking from you. So a slave might get, they'll get given food because we need to keep the slave healthy to work. We don't care. Yeah. We don't care how healthy you are. We don't care. We'll have your food money. We'll have your housekeeping budget. We'll have the lot. We don't care about you. And as soon as you can't provide the resources, when you go to a food bank, can't you, if you haven't got enough money for food? If you can't provide the resources, you're useless. You're pointless. To the next one. Oh, that's exactly how it is.
Terrible.
It's horrific.
That's a very good analogy with the slave. It was in the owner's interest to make sure.
The owner wanted to keep the slave healthy. Because they don't care if they're.
But it would seem that what you're saying, the MLM, they don't care anyway.
They couldn't care less. People are at the absolute depths of despair and depression, and they're told, "Oh, you're negative. You're negative. It's your negativity. It's your negativity that's stopping this working."
Tell me, has anybody analysed? Are there suicide rates or anything like this? Terrible, people.
I said on the Kiani video that I made a video about a company that's relaunching in the UK. A company which is where it's going to have a basic expectation of its victims, let's say, to put in 200 odd a month, right, to chase the 1%, right, minimum 200 odd a month. The debts that these mostly women will be accumulating, I dread to think, because we know people commit suicide over debt. We know people do. We know that high levels of debt and suicide are, correlated. So, but they would never attribute it to, we have marriage breakdowns. We have that are never attributed to this. I had a man in my inbox not long ago. His wife had joined Unique, which is a makeup MLM. And the entire marriage, of course there will have been, there's going to have been other issues, but this would have been a straw breaking the camel's back, a massive straw to break the camel's back. This woman, you're not supporting my business, you don't support me. He could see what was happening, what she'd been dragged into this scam. And it was funny because I noticed this woman, she was in Unique, she's now in Urban Retreat. So she's moved from Unique onto Urban Retreat now. And he was in my inbox absolutely beside himself. He just needed somebody to speak to about this, because none of his friends, none of his family understood the problem, because there's no education about this. They just saw her going off and doing this kind of a bit embarrassing sales job, and they didn't understand why it was affecting the marriage so much. But the reason it was affecting the marriage so much is because she was putting hundreds of pounds a month into this scam and seeing no return. How would you have felt? You know what you're like. You get into a relationship with a woman and you find out she's tipping even £50 a month into this pyramid scheme. Yeah. You wouldn't be able to stand for it. You wouldn't be able to take it. You couldn't stand it. It would drive you insane. But there's these, men, and it is mainly men, but I know that, and I said that my friend was in a relationship with a man who got into a multi-level marketing company. These men are, they have families, they're going out to work. They might have, young kids. Their wife is alone at home, lonely. They get involved in one of these companies, and suddenly the joint savings or the joint current account is hemorrhaging a couple of hundred a month. And then they challenge the woman they challenge their partner about it, because it could be a woman, could be a man, the woman off working. They challenge them about it, and all hell breaks loose because you're not supporting me. You're being so negative. This is my business. I want to do something for myself. I love it. I love what I do. And it causes murders. The marriage breakdowns are family breakdowns.
It needs to be analysed. what is it, the oxygen of publicity. That's what's required, that you breathe into it loads of oxygen to flush out what actually is going on, and what are the percentages of marriage breakdowns, divorce, all these factors.
They would never be able to. They'd never be able to, because they would never be able to do it though. Because people transition in and out of the companies, they'd never, and it's obviously not going to be the only cause. So they would never, and people don't want to talk about, people will not, when people leave ththese companies, they will not talk about it. They're too embarrassed, they're too ashamed, they don't even want to talk about it. At the moment, the BBC are looking, and this isn't the first time this has happened, the BBC are looking for people who will participate in a documentary and talk on camera about getting involved with a company during lockdown and losing money. You'd think that you put that out to thousands of people, and you get a good amount of people want to come out and talk about it. No, they don't want to. They're too embarrassed, because they know that they go on TV, on camera. Everyone that knows was like, but you were telling everyone how amazing it was at the time. You were trying to recruit us all, and what was that all bullshit? Because they won't understand the amount of brainwashing and indoctrination that went on, but they'll just think that person was trying to scam them. They'll think, well, all my friends and family are going to see me go on there. They're going to know that I tried to get them into this when I was losing money. They're going to think I'm a scammer, and they're embarrassed and they're ashamed, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to be humiliated further on TV, and they won't talk about it. So to find people that would willing to be a statistic on something like that, never going to happen. Never going to happen. But rounding it off, I mean, I wanted to come to the point about the residual income, because it comes back down to sort of like when we became agrarian, this need to make preservations for our future, in this kind of structure that you were stuck in. And then you can move on to sort of, further down the line, and you get the evolution of the middle class, and I can save money, and I coinage, and I can keep money. And then you look at the people then can have they get older, the life expectancy increases, and then we need to make preservations for the future. And they base it off this need to sort of be looked after in your old age, the residual income. It's all a load of nonsense. The entire thing is a scam. And we may get Sponlie Senior on at a later date, and discuss his insights into other things. But what was important today was to show to everyone how we got here and why we got here, and to give people a greater understanding of why they use the techniques that they use, why they work so effectively, and how it's such a scam, because they're using the techniques of a sort of industrialized age where people had the capability to kind of be entrepreneurial. They call them be an entrepreneur. Can you imagine somebody in a feudal society, and they'd be like, well, you can be an entrepreneur, come and land yourself in the peasantry. It's entrepreneurial, you're growing, and that's kind of what they're saying. So it's like this kind of, this advertising, this idea of being an entrepreneur and taking control of your life and being able to then have this wonderful lifestyle, but then you're taking that person and you're putting them essentially in a feudal pyramid where they're never going to get out of there. And this is why this is such an impossible scam. And that's why I wanted to bring Sponlie Senior on here today to explain that to you all.
Well, that's just saying as an afterthought, there's a wonderful, it's in the Penguin book of short stories, I recommend it to you if you haven't read it, is The Country of the Blind by H.G. Wells. I don't know if you know it, but he takes this famous statement, in the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Oh yeah, they're saying.
And it's well worth a read, because when he does, this guy rolls in falls down a hill and lands out in a country where people are blind, and he's sighted. And he keeps telling them about all the wonderful things, and they won't believe him. And in the end, he falls in love with the blind lady, and he wants to marry her. And she said, the only way I'm going to marry you is if you blind yourself. And become like us. And he, it's this debate in him. Do I want to become blind when I can see? And I can see what they're doing isn't right. And in the end, he escapes. But it's a wonderful story. It has ramifications with a lot of things.
That's exactly what they're. Listen, what you've just said is perfect, because they are they walk into these companies off the basis of this is a sales job, right? But they slowly are indoctrinated, and their sight, they are completely blinded to the reality of it in the end. And then all the people on the outside who can see what's going on are telling them, and they are being hostile, those people. And the only people that they then are people that are just as blind as they want to try and get people into this. And it's actually a fantastic analogy. Really good.
It's only a short story, but you could put it on your whatever your page is or whatever. H.G. Wells, the country of the blind, and you know, that's it would seem to me that that's what they are. A good analogy, that the MLMs is the country of the blind.
It is. Well, they're not at the top. The 90 odd percent are the blind people. The people above that are pretending to be, and they are.
Yeah, whatever. But that's it. You're joining the country of the blind, and if you go in as a sighted person, they make you feel as though
they will take your sight from you. They will take it.
And if you want to marry into this society, that was the story. It's a wonderful story. I mean, it's not to do with MLM, but I would recommend it to your subscribers or people who you know, watch what you do. It's on the internet. You can get it, but it's H.G. Wells, The Country of the Blind.
Right. Okay then. So till next time.